Good afternoon. This is Tim Markle. I'm director of the Southern Regional Center for Children and Youth with Special Healthcare Needs. We're out of the Weisman Center. We exist to help support and connect families to resources and help them find the stuff that they need throughout 14 counties in southern and southwest Wisconsin. Want to let people know that this is being recorded, therefore please avoid using any personal information that you do not want out on the interweb, because once it is out there forever, and there's nothing anybody can do about it. So please be careful what you say or what you put into the chat box. That being said, we do want an interactive discussion. And on that idea of an interactive discussion, I want to remind you that we are not health experts, we are not education experts, we are not legal experts. Please do not take anything that we say as legal advice, educational advice, or medical advice. Please see the proper person who knows what they're doing. We are here to discuss what's happening with families in Wisconsin, and specifically in southern Wisconsin. Which brings me to today, when we're going to talk about rural Wisconsin. The good, the bad, and the ugly. If anybody got offended, see, you have to make noise, Rose, or they're not going to see you. You can make cool hand signals, but if you don't go, cha, then the camera won't go to you. Perfect. Well done. And so we're being joined today by Rose. I have known Rose Cutting for years as what I consider to be a parent leader. Down in rural Wisconsin, down in Fenimore, Wisconsin, which, by the way, if anybody listens from Timothy's Cafe in Fenimore, for a discount on the Timothy Benedict, I will give you a shout out. But until then, I'm not going to mention the name of the cafe that's named after me. That's Fenimore, and I love it. So we're going to talk more about what we love about rural Wisconsin and what rural Wisconsin families with special healthcare needs love about rural Wisconsin. Also talk a little bit about what some of the challenges are. And we may or may not get into, what's ugly. We probably won't use ugly, but there's some things that are pretty hard about living distances away from hospitals. And it brings about its own challenges. But let's start by introducing Rose. Rose, do you want to tell us just a little bit about who you would include in your family, and then how did you end up here? What all are you doing? Sort of, how did you get involved beyond your family? Because I know you're a passionate mom, but now you're like passionate for other people's kids as well. How'd that happen?
Well, thank you, Tim, and thank you for allowing us to have this platform and conversation with you today. If for nothing else, it'll be a good joke reel for your bloopers for the other awesome ones that you've put on. So we, how'd I get here? Our family includes myself and my husband and 3 children and a dog that my children constantly remind me that I love. Sure. So our oldest is on the spectrum, but also has the apraxia of speech and sensory processing disorder. I'm going to refer to him as Buddy. And I always get a kick out of that, because when somebody hears Buddy or hears me talk about him, I often wonder, what age bracket do they think I am referring to and so forth. Like you said, for confidentiality and everything, I'm not going to give you his exact age, but I can tell you that I look up at him, and that means he's, I not only look up to him, but I look up at him. And he's 6 foot tall. So when I say my little buddy, I am, of course, meaning, the one I remember this size. He has 2 wonderful sisters. They are kind of his best therapists that you could ever find, because they can be understanding, but they could also be pushy and not understanding, and that makes him get out of his comfort zone, which is awesome, until mom's having her German Iowa farm girl moment and loses it. So there's that. Good thing my
What?
kids don't speak German.
You're allowed to lose it in rural Wisconsin as a mom of special health care needs? It gets
Yeah,
tough sometimes?
nah,
Yeah,
nah.
I didn't think so. You know, that good German stock.
Yeah, no attitude there whatsoever.
No,
Yeah,
none.
thank God the kids are only half German because I can still outbest them.
There you go. Yeah,
There you
because
go.
there's times where it's not out of the ordinary for parents to, like you said, lose it.
Yeah,
Is we all get freaking overwhelmed wherever we live.
right, right. And so the one of the things that I like to tell people is that I might talk about the positives. I might talk about the awesome things. I'm kind of uh, I'm not addicted to Facebook, but I see the value in a good Facebook post. Um, and sometimes when there's a lot of positive out there, I might throw in a scenario where I don't look the best, or
Sure.
my child might not have made the best decision, and so forth. And of course you get all those friends that reply to it, and they're like, oh, you're doing great and all this stuff and everything. And some that over the top start wording and everything, and I'll side message
Right.
them and say, you got to remember, I use Facebook as a platform because I might have heard that another family is struggling, or somebody's trying to compare themselves to somebody else. And as we know, in the autism world, you can't compare autism to autism. It doesn't exist. There's
No way.
similarities, but so in my mind, the best thing that I can do without being too intrusive is to throw a story out there that's happened to us personally, that hopefully, because those people are watching and
Hmm.
talking and so forth, or grandmas are, or aunts or uncles, or there's a person at the gas station that knows you enough to say, hey, I saw, but so a lot of times I'm not afraid to put a story out there that doesn't probably put me in the best light, or a situation that I've been part of, um, but that I can turn around and have it be, and here's where we are now, so, and
That whole we made it through. It
yeah,
wasn't easy. We've struggled with this, but I want to let you know that we didn't stay there. Is that
right.
we managed to get it through, and you can too.
Right. Or we're still struggling with it, but it's not as bad as it was. Or here's a resource we tapped into, which,
Yeah, here's how we're working on it.
right, which part of your question was, how'd we get here? How'd we move from it being about our family to other families?
Yeah.
So little caveat here that I always like to throw out there is you're talking to somebody that has a wonderful degree in dairy herd management and agribusiness. Um, so, um, why in the world would I have anything to offer to an education society, medical society, anybody outside of a rural area? I don't honestly know, but wonderful people like yourselves and so forth seem to let this just keep going, because
Oh yeah.
I dig my hole, but then I managed to talk the passerby into throwing me a rope and getting me back out of it somehow. So, but that being said, Buddy, when he was young and diagnosed, uh, one thing led to another, and we were able to find some resources, knock on wood, that allowed us to tap into therapy right away between 3.5 and 4 years of age.
Oh,
And be based on the conversation and the so when we went through the diagnosis process, that what do you call it, the exit interview, I guess, as it were, when
okay.
they come in and say, here's our findings and so forth,
Hmm.
um, when we were able to have that, um, there seemed to be this long laundry list of things that my husband and myself should prepare ourselves for, that our son would never be able to do. Okay. And
Mm,
everybody's knee-jerk reaction right away is a negative. I have no problem with the negative, because then you work to find a solution, right? So except for, can I say, do not buy the Star Wars Christmas 1,000-piece puzzle from this year, because there is no solving that thing. There's none. Not going to do it. Anyway, I
Thank you,
digress.
and we'll have more toy reviews by Dro's a little bit future in the year, closer to Christmas. We will
There you go.
toys that work on the farm, toys that don't work on farms, and
Yep.
so we'll be getting into that in November. But now back.
Yeah,
to,
yeah.
Okay.
So what ended up happening was Buddy started progressing with some in-home therapy.
Okay.
And he went, his first day of school, when he turned 3 and aged out of the birth to 3 program, was his first day of school. So our little man has had a full-time job since he's been about 2, if you count the therapy hours. So, he, taking him into the elementary school and watching kiddos, you know, we live in a small community, and that kind of, for those that are worried about confidentiality and everything and so forth, there is incredible confidentiality in our school district, but let's be real, you get to know people, and if you are able to tap into a positive, people want to find hope in you. Okay, so then they have those conversations wherever they're at. You just have to learn how to get them out of the produce aisle and out in the parking lot next to their car, you know. So started noticing little ones that had very similar reactions and so forth as to what Buddy had, and just hearing the teachers and getting to be friends with the teachers, because my husband or I are from here. You heard me call myself Iowa farm girl, German farm girl. I'm from 3 hours south. He's from 3 hours north. As the song goes, we met in the middle.
Can we give bonus points to anybody who eventually watches this video and puts in the chat box the title of that good old country song, Meet in the Middle, and who sang it?
Yeah, you're gonna be proud of me. I kept it in. I didn't start singing it.
Right,
so
right. So, but bonus points.
Thank you.
In the chat box.
Thank you. Yes. So anyway, one thing led to another, and having conversations with teachers and really getting to know them, and know that reg ed teachers were really begging for more knowledge on how to help the special ed teachers and help these kiddos, you know, and have successes that they were seeing in our son. You know, so that kind of spearheaded myself talking with the lead therapist that was monitoring our son, and one thing led to another, and we started this nonprofit organization. He and I did, another gentleman, and this will take up too much time, but your keywords, if you ever meet me, are a hamburger and a birthday party and a haircut. And that's how Aiming for Acceptance started, and that's a nonprofit that we saw. At first, we were just going to do fundraising to give gift cards for weighted blankets, for gas cards, for babysitters, for what have you, to get educators, parents, medical people, anybody that wanted to help the autism community of Southwest Wisconsin. Okay, and one thing led to another, and we built this wonderful center with the help of all the names on the leaves back behind me on that tree there, in hopes of having a one-stop shop for therapies, so that families that live out in rural areas, that it's hard to get to them in inclement weather and so forth, or just to be able to come here and access therapies, and have providers have a satellite center to lease space from. So
right, which brings up a couple of things about rural Wisconsin. The first thing that you brought up that I'm really kind of curious if you want to say anything more of is, I know that growing up also with a son on the autism spectrum, is that there would be times where people would look a little odd at my parenting choices or my child's children choices. I don't know how to explain them. But generally, I'm probably never going to see these people again in my life. Whereas I would imagine you are encountering some of the same people over and over and over again when you get your essentials, when you get your food, when you go out to eat, when you fill the car up with gas, is that you get to know all these people that are around you. Do you see that as a positive or a negative, or like a little bit of both? What's that like? Because I get to stay relatively anonymous when I go out in public.
Um, I would say that is the title fits that answer very well. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Because normally some of those interactions start out ugly, right?
Yeah.
There would be a person that would see what I had to do to comfort our child, or what my child had to do to comfort himself, um, and think it was an ugly choice, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But and that's kind of where you have to help each other figure out what's your reaction going to be. Is it going to be
your reaction to the other people's reaction?
yes, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, what my reaction as a parent is going to be to the other person, because if I'm ugly back, it just gets uglier, right?
Yeah.
If I'm good back, it gets bad, in meaning that it's probably going to be interaction that's going to need more explaining.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning that somebody's either going to get offended that I might have said something and not just done the nice Midwestern thing and walked away. Or
You betcha.
yeah, right, yeah.
Yeah.
Or it's going, and eventually it'll turn around to good. Now, what I'm going to say is we've never really we had our very first ugly interaction last year in a movie theater. And otherwise for ourselves, it's always kind of just been a small enough town that everybody's like, oh, that's Buddy, and looks like he's having a rough day, and that's what that is. Now, I will say for other families that they get judged a little bit more, but then that's where I feel like it's part of my job to step up and say, you're seeing Buddy be awesome and interact okay in public because we were able to tap into resources and give him the tools of how to navigate his day, right? Whereas other families didn't have that luck, and then what I totally use that for is a learning experience for everybody, and say, that's why when you see us do these fundraisers, or you see us host the law enforcement to come over and we talk about what is autism and so forth for the Grant County Sheriff's Department or something, that's what we're trying to tell you is that, yeah, you all know Buddy and he's having a rocking day, but you don't know what you're going to come into if you ever have come into our home.
So how can, not that you have the answers to everything in the world, but I'm curious, is that after years, you have some insights into how rural families, rural communities might be able to better support families with children with special health care needs. Because what I'm hearing from your story is it definitely didn't happen in a silo, farm joke, but that there were others that came around. So how can how do you think rural communities could use that to their advantage? Any ideas?
Well, first of all, to my farming community, I apologize. I'm trying to teach Tim as well as I can, but
I mean, it's hopeless. I'm from Toledo, Ohio. I mean, I am not from Wisconsin.
Yeah.
I'm not from rural. Yeah. No, we had houses built on top of each other. I know nothing about this life.
There you go. I think, to be honest, I think saturation is a keyword in answering how do we start helping others understand the families around them. And by saturation, I mean twofold. One is that right now you can't, when you use a farming term, you can't shake a stick without somebody saying, I know somebody that's on the autism spectrum, right?
Okay.
Or with sensory needs, or with behavioral. inputs needed, so the saturation of us all either knowing, being related to, or having good friends that are struggling with this, I think helps in and of itself, because if they're related to you, or especially if they're a good friend, they're not a bad parent. That child from, heck, you probably drove the car or went and milked their cows so they could go have the baby or whatever, right? You were there from the beginning. There was nothing other than dumb luck that has led the family in this journey, right? And I'm going to say dumb luck, but I always try to turn it around to a positive, because there's that word luck in there, that with a special needs child in southern rural Wisconsin, or rural anywhere, it's going to change your parenting. And especially if it's your first, it's going to change it for all your kids. You're going to be more in tune to them, or be able to be more advocating for your family. Okay. But so the first saturation is, there's a lot more cases, there's a lot more children, there's a lot more out there, right? But the other saturation is, families aren't choosing to just keep that child at home anymore. You're not choosing to hide them. Is it embarrassing, some of the choices they make and some of the things you have to do? Yeah. But you know what? It's your life. It's your journey. Yeah. And you still want to go to that potluck. You still want to go to that basketball game. You still want to have some sort of life. It's just sometimes it needs to be interrupted to better help your child. And then that's when instead of staying for the whole, I'm a big football fan, instead of staying for the whole football game, you stay till halftime, and then you go home and hurry up and get the local radio station on so you can listen to the last part of the game, But it's the saturation which turns into acceptance, I would say.
So the main things that I'm hearing, one is this whole emphasis on connection and helping people connect what they're seeing, what they're experiencing, connect empathetically to something in their own life, to someone in their own life. And that if you can make that empathetic bridge between what you are seeing and that family that you're looking at and somebody in your own life and struggles that you have, is that empathy can go a very long way. Is that can be really helped. And then that connections that you have in the community is that whole knowing each other, which can go both ways. I mean, if you're a total snot of a parent, everybody knows that as well. And that's going to have its own consequences. They're going to treat you differently. Whereas, like you said, if they've seen that you are there and that you are doing everything you can to provide an environment for that child to help them grow, chances are they're going to give you a little bit more slack and they're going to be a little more understanding. At least that's, now correct me if I'm wrong, please, because I am still a city boy.
Well, I would say not only are they going to give you a little more slack, but they're going to try and match what the effort you're trying to put in.
Okay.
They might not know how. You might have to help guide the well-intentioned friend or the teacher or the bus driver or the para or lunch lady. You might have to give them pointers on how to best help.
Yeah.
But it truly, one of the things that is the bad and the ugly is how lacking in actual certified resources we are. Okay. And I say certified resources, meaning those that you need certification or degrees or some sort of title.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So I think one of the projects you and I and the Wiseman Center and myself worked on was the Action Lab. And I think one of the things that surprised a lot of people was in a 5-county area, we have no pediatricians.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and a lot of the medical field is actually you have helped me with the terminology, but like nurse practitioners or something of that sort. So that's the ugly and the bad, but that also leads to innovation, right? And
Yes.
that, you know, so for ourselves, we were lucky with Buddy. We actually got in with a ABA therapy place that was just starting and needed clients and was willing to drive an hour out to us. But the
Yeah.
other thing that they were able to tap into is our local tech college that had a childcare program that my husband works at, and that we're good friends
Okay.
with the ladies that run the daycare there. So they've got the on-site lab as the daycare for their students, but also the instructors, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I could call them and just say, hey, next year we're going to up Buddy's hours. I'm going to need 2 more good students. And we could tap into that resource,
Yep.
which then those students sometime continue on to our local UW system to do education, early education, or more in their child care or human social services. And they go and they start exposing their instructors to what
Mm-hmm.
a line therapist could be and what they need. So that started this whole influx of being able to access that. So that was an unknown resource that we had. But then another resource that comes to us for being able to tap into something that doesn't have to be certified are there are a lot of farm families out here that just need a little extra income, and they need it
Mm-hmm.
kind of on weird hours because they need to do chores or they need to run kids to events or what have you, run and take care of elderly family members or what have you. And they literally, I could call them and say, hey, I'm or looking for somebody that for 8 hours a week to work with Buddy. So it's not even part-time, right? Um,
Right.
and they think about it and they're like, yeah, I wouldn't mind doing that. And so they get trained and then they start liking it and they go to, an outing with friends or something. And boom, you have 3 or 4 people that are willing to do 8-10 hours in these agencies that can have the senior therapists that can
Mm-hmm.
oversee big clientele. We have this untapped resource of populations of people that need that extra income. So resource
Nice.
certified resources we're lacking
Yeah.
in. And if I could put a plug in there for anybody that can know a child that is incredibly good with children but doesn't want to go into education, you have them get a hold of me. I can help them find a career path and help them stay home local and have a really
Mm-hmm.
good career. So
And it sounds like some of what you're working on is sort of that growing your own line therapist, growing your own respite. The fact that there probably is not going to be an agency that's going to employ someone who lives there to provide respite or something. So you have to start to look at, okay, what are the qualifications? What are the minimum qualifications? Because what's most important is that they get to know my kid, is
right,
that they get to understand my child and how to interact with my child or whatever child that they're dealing with. Those qualifications are wonderful, but if they don't want to take the time to understand my kid, it's not going to do any good. It's not going to build that relationship and the kid's not going to learn.
right,
Um,
right. And I'm glad you let me off the hook early in our conversation, said I don't have to know everything. So thank you. Because
you're
truly,
welcome.
truly, there, and to use the silo reference again, there are conversations that are had in little pockets and around, all areas that you're not able to tap into until you stumble over it, right? So I do know that there are some agencies that try to help with respite things or with therapy things and so forth. It's just some of them, and I haven't connected yet. And I say yet because I will find you.
Yes.
But yeah, I just, just to be able to bring the different idea of what a resource can be. I mentioned building this learning center. This was an old feed mill. And then it was a warehouse, and then it was a tractor dealership, and all of that fun, right? And
Mm-hmm.
now it's a sensory friendly space, and we could not have done it. Tree is our logo because we like to know that things are always growing and we'll have changing seasons and whatnot. But one thing that I really wanted to point out for a resource for us is our communities. So
Yes.
and back behind me, every leaf has a name of a business or person that donated something specifically to this project. And I'll tell you, Tim, there were nights that the kids were tucked into bed, and I tell my husband, I just want to go over and try and finish that drywall and prove to the gentleman I had a retired builder and myself. We mostly just did the labor work, except for a few contractors that came in
Sure.
and things that we really shouldn't have been able to do.
Very
And
happy you did not do your own electrical. I think that's one of those things that it's really important to bring in
yep,
someone who knows electricity.
yeah.
So good job there.
Yeah, yeah. But so, I'd come back and work at nighttime on the wall or something. And I point because back behind me is another room. And that's,
Mm-hmm.
that's where I learned that a nail gun not turned down properly can shoot a nail straight through and hit a gas furnace, but it bounced off. So
Oh,
I
okay.
just
Well,
kept
as long as
working.
it bounced off.
Yeah, I just
I
kept
mean, yeah,
working. It was all
yeah.
good.
Oh,
It was all good.
absolutely. I mean, if there's no explosions, you just get on with the day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, it made for a fun phone call for the furnace guy the next morning
Well, yeah.
when he picked up his messages and said, I've heard of a nail in a tire, or in, he named 2 or 3 things, and he goes, Rose, never heard of a nail in the furnace before. So that was fun. But no, the resources we have are the people, the
Yeah.
businesses, because they want their community to grow and thrive. They don't want your child to have to stay home. They don't want your child to not reach their potential. They don't want a negative life for any of their fellow community members. They want you here thriving so the community thrives. And that's what we're all about.
Yeah. And I cannot think of a better way to just stop this part of the conversation, knowing that we do have some people that have joined us online for this conversation. Invite them to ask any questions. But if you're willing, Rose, I think there's a lot more that we would be able to talk about. So if you wouldn't mind, I'll reach out and see if we can have you back on in a month or two, if that's all right. I'd still like to talk about the traveling, the distance, the therapies, and what you might have learned that might be able to help other families that are dealing with the distance that is such a barrier sometimes, and what are some creative ways to look at that. So we'll have you back on,
Okay.
if you're willing.
I am, and I apologize if I took too much time up
You're
on something
fine.
else that we missed
You're
out on that.
fine. I can't think of anything that you said that I wouldn't have wanted you to say. And if there is, I'll edit it out so nobody will ever know that it happened.
I had the script. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, stop it. There's no script. Remember? It's reality TV. So if there is, no, don't say those words. They're listening.
Sorry.
So if there's somebody out there who is listening that would like to ask Rose a question, please feel free, or you can also feel free to put it in the chat box. Reminder that this will be recorded and posted later. So any questions?
I do have a question.
Oh, fantastic.
So, and Rose, you kind of already talked about this, but I'm really curious. I know that in your area right now, there really is a lack of ABA providers. And obviously you've talked about, what you guys are trying to do. And I know in particular, there's a lack of ABA for older children. I'm just curious, like, what your community is doing and what other communities could learn about trying to recruit some of those certified people who can lead that. I mean, I know that, at least I've heard that, one of the issues of having it is that there's no, certified behavior therapist to oversee the problem. You might be able to get those line therapists to do that direct work, but there's nobody to oversee it. And so I'm just curious what your community, or again, other communities, could do to try to lure some certified people to provide that service or other services as well. It doesn't have to just be that.
Okay. Yeah, interesting question. And I wish I had a fast, easy answer, because that would mean I had a really good set in place plan of how to fill that position. I'm not a patient person. I'm learning, I hope I live to be 200 years old. Maybe by then I will be. But I have been humbled to the point of knowing that I need to be patient for this. And you're absolutely right. We have an older population of loved ones that have had an incredibly hard journey, because, that saturation part wasn't there. And they were treated more as a nuisance than a, how do we support you? And that leaves an incredible amount of guilt for myself, because I know my son has it better right now. So I'm thankful for the hard path and the hard journey that they had to clear for us to go. I honor a few of the families that I know of that have had incredibly hard journeys. And every time I see them, I tell them this all is to honor their journey, and so forth. So I think the hard part of our journey right now is knowing that these therapies do exist, and that people don't often want to locate to rural areas. They don't see it as resource rich for themselves or their families. That's why I think it might have to be the easy answer might be time. And by time, I mean that we would have to grow our own to fill that slot. And that's why I like grabbing line therapists that are from families that are very local, that I kind of know that mom and dad and aunts and uncles want them to come back home. And eventually, there are a lot of people that do want to relocate back home, but there's the scared part of, do I get to have a job that I love, and not just have to do minimum wage part-time in 3 different jobs to live out here, So I think time might be one of the answers. Time to have these line therapists start reaching of the age and the hours and the wisdom to get them through a certification process. Another thing is that, and I wish, I can't find it, I'm not very good with technology things, but in the winter, I read an article that was published in a pediatric journal, and it was more medical based, but I remember the facts because they were so astounding to me, and yet I understood them. And they did a study across the United States for ABA, that senior therapist, that RBT senior therapist role, okay? And or not RBT, senior therapist role. And if the caseload was allowed to triple for every current senior therapist position in the United States, there would only be 2 regions in the United States that would have enough senior therapists to supervise the caseloads, okay? And so that tells me, okay, it's not just a Southwest Wisconsin issue, it's a nationwide issue. So that broadened my thinking, and not that I'm a capable enough person to fix that problem, but I think, again, if you let this go long enough, the right people hear things, and we are able to start talking and to start, it's interesting to talk to school counselors, because when I tell them, here's what I'm looking for, that a kid jumped into their head.
Oh, yeah.
And that it was probably somebody they thought would never thrive outside of their community. And so that gave that counselor hope to give that family and that child hope for a career back here. Okay, so I'm hoping that pays off. But I think it's just more of that saturation talk. The more we show them this is a viable career, the more we show the reg ed population our needs. I think I hope it comes. I'm probably fooling myself with some of this, but we all got to start somewhere. So.
Absolutely. And, you know, that's a good question. We know, like I said, this is going to be recorded. And so, you know, greatly, if anybody has other answers and would like to join that discussion, please just let us know. Should know how to contact us through the video. With that, I would, unless you have a follow-up question. Very wise of you. Good job. Thank you for, you know, understanding where I was going with all this. Thank you so much for being here, Rose. Thank you so much for lending your insight and sharing your stories and your family. We really appreciate that. We will have you back because I know that there's more that we could talk about. Do want to let people know that next week, June 3rd, we will be continuing with the conversations on showing up for kids. We'll be talking with Matthew Zelmer, who's one of the resource specialists out of Wisconsin Facets. We're going to be talking about what can Facets do for families, and specifically zoning in on what is their training around understanding these IEPs, Individualized Education Program, and special education, and this whole world that is special education, and is there help available, and what sort of help is out there. And then in 2 weeks, we'll be joined with some representatives from Easter Seal to talk about what do we do with our kids all summer now that the camps are closing. What are some of their suggestions? What are they trying to do? So both of those are scheduled for 1 o'clock, June 3rd, and then 1 o'clock on June 10th. Registration will be available shortly. So please feel free to watch your email, sign up for the email, whatever you need to do. Rose, again, thank you so much. And hopefully we'll talk to some more people next week. Thanks again.
Sounds
Bye-bye.
good. Thank you.